All right. Good morning, everyone. Let's get started. We got a beautiful day out there, and I think the temperatures are a little more fall-like than they've been over the past few days. So we'll get moving with the meeting and then let you get on with your weekend. Good morning, and thank you so much for coming to the community workshop for Albemarle Road Park. My name is Bert Lynn. I'm the Capital Planning Division Director for Mecklenburg County Park and Recreation. I appreciate you taking the time to spend some time with us and talk about a much needed improvement project at Albemarle Road Park. Last year, Park and Recreation was provided some funding to spread across 20 to 25 parks and recreation centers within our systems. And Albemarle Road Park was at the top of that list in terms of need. We're here today to discuss some initial improvements and what those improvements might look like, and also discuss a larger vision for the park that we hope to wrap into a project in the near future, a larger project. Next slide, please. So before we get started, I would imagine that most of you are more familiar with Zoom now than you were 8 or so months ago. A lot of what we've done, at least in the department, from a community outreach standpoint, has been through this platform. But if you're new to Zoom, I'll take you through a couple of things very quickly. So in order to mute and unmute yourself, there's a microphone shaped icon, typically in the bottom of your screen. Sometimes it might be in the top pull down menu. When the red slash is through that, you're muted, and I'll ask you to stay muted through most of the meeting, though toward the end we will have kind of an open dialogue Q&A session. Also, we encourage you to turn your video on with the camera icon there. The red slash means your video is off. If you don't want to do that, you don't have to. But I always like to try to see the folks that I'm working with and make it as close to meeting with you face-to-face as possible. And then also throughout the presentation, as we're going through, we've got a lot of information to cover. So if you miss something or a question comes up, you can use the chat feature. And so there's a little dialogue bubble down in the bottom of the screen, or maybe in the top pull down, that says chat. So very quickly, for everybody to get used to the chat feature, if you would type your name, your zip code, and your favorite place to go outside, be it a park, a greenway, a nature preserve, or if it's a recreation center, that'd be great too. So I will give everybody just a minute to do that. And then as folks start to populate that information, we'll move on to the next slide, and I'll introduce the team that we've got here today. All right. So like I said, my name is Bert Lynn. I'm with Mecklenburg County Park and Recreation. With me today is Joyce Figueroa, who you'll be hearing from in just a couple of minutes. We're also joined today by our design team for this project, Landworks Design Group. So you'll hear from Matt Langston and Lisa Carey in just a few minutes as well. Next slide. So today we're going to discuss possible improvements at Albemarle Road Park. We anticipate these improvements will take place in 2 phases. The initial phase, which will start, and we'll talk about a schedule for that in a few minutes, and then a second larger phase that we hope to fund through our next capital improvement plan. Over the last 3 to 4 weeks, we have been collecting input from the community on the Park and Recreation Public Input website, and we'll share that link a little later in the presentation if you haven't already had a chance to go there. We'll also share some information that we take in some polls with you today, and then we'll share some of the results that we've heard so far through the Public Input website. If we have, or we will have time at the end to answer questions. So if any questions pop up in the chat dialogue, we'll make sure to ask and answer those at the end, kind of moderate through that. And then we'll also have an opportunity to unmute and ask questions, or just have kind of open discussion there. So with that, it's my pleasure to welcome Joyce Figueroa, planner with Mecklenburg County Park and Recreation. Take it away, Joyce.
Thank you, Bert. Like Bert said, I'm Joyce. I am the planner for the Albemarle Road Park project. and I will provide you some information about the past and the present of the park site. So Albemarle Park is an older park that was originally developed by the city sometime between 1989 and 1997. Albemarle Park Recreation Center was built between 1981 and 1982. In 1989, the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Parks Master Plan prioritized the Albemarle Park site for land acquisition and development, and the recommendation more specifically was to acquire and develop approximately 150 acres for what was then envisioned as the Albemarle District Park, which would include the Albemarle Recreation Center. But starting in 1989, W.T. Harris, which was formerly known as Delta, was built or started to get built. It took a couple of years, and divided the park property from the existing recreation center. And in 1992, the city and the county parks department, they merged to what is now known as Mecklenburg County Parks and Recreation, and all the parks and recreation facilities moved from the jurisdiction of the city to Mecklenburg County. And in 1997, the property deeds of the existing park at the time and the recreation center were transferred from the city to the county officially as part of that merge. Next slide, please. So throughout the years, Albemarle Park has fallen into a state of disinvestment and disrepair. This was very evident when the park was recently graded an F through the new park rating system. So over here in Park and Recreation, we're currently working to develop a new Park and Recreation master plan that is called MeckPlaybook. An important component of this process involved completing an inventory and an evaluation of all of our park properties through a newly developed rating system. So getting an F for parks could mean that the park needs immediate attention, that there is extensive visible neglect, that the equipment may be broken or a safety hazard. It could mean that the paths or trails are broken or there's some absent, that there are very few or no assets at all, that there is a overall lack of cohesiveness in the design of the park, that the visibility and our signage might be broken or hard to find, and that it may lack ADA accessibility. Since the park is essentially exhibiting most of these conditions, hence that's why I got an F. So where do we go from here? We would first like to encourage you, every single one in here, to go to the MeckPlaybook website. We put it there in the bottom, and we'll also add it to the chat for easy access for more information about the department's master planning process and how you can get involved in the process, as it is going to inform the future development and priorities for the department. So that's very important. Next slide, please. And second, we're very excited to inform that $250,000, as Bert mentioned, has been allocated to the Albemarle Road Neighborhood Park to get some much needed improvements done to the park. As Bert mentioned, the development of the park will be in steps, including immediate improvements as well as future amenity expansions. And we need to plan for both. The master plan will help us evaluate the site and create a vision for the future of the park. And the first phase will provide some initial improvements from that vision for the community to enjoy now. The goal of this project is to reactivate and reclaim the park into an asset the community can enjoy, benefit from, and take pride in now and into the future. Our project timeline is to gather input from the website survey and from today's meeting to finalize the conceptual plan by December 2020. The consultants will then start working on the design and permitting of what we're calling the first phase of development, or the initial improvements. And we hope to start construction in the spring of 2021 and have the construction completed by the fall of 2021. Next slide, please. So before we dive deeper into the actual project side, I will give you an overview of the general development guidelines for our neighborhood park classification. Our neighborhood parks are smaller in size. They're usually between 2 and 20 acres. They're designed to serve the immediate adjacent local neighborhood. They are usually only walkable with no parking lots or restroom facilities. And some typical amenities could include picnic shelters, benches, multi-purpose fields, maybe a half-court basketball, volleyball courts, walking trails, among other amenities. I will now like to turn it over to our consultant, who will take us through the park site analysis, the park programming ideas, and the public input process. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. As Joyce and Bert have mentioned, this is an aerial photograph of the, by the way, I'm Matt Langston from Landworks Design Group. This is an aerial photograph of the site, and you can see the yellow area is the part we're going to be talking about today, and the area bounded by the orange dotted line is the rec center after the overall site was sliced by W.T. Harris. We'll talk through some of the existing conditions and some of the existing challenges that exist and opportunities, and then we'll talk about the site analysis process, and sort of where we go from here. So you can see Harris Boulevard, as I mentioned, the existing apartment complexes to the north on both sides of Harris Boulevard. Idlewild Road North ties in here to signalize the intersection. Albemarle Road Elementary School is here, and they've got a drive access off to the west. And then the neighborhood down here, Maple Knoll Avenue, has a stub connection to the park property right here at the southwest. The existing facilities at the park include this circular parking area. There's an open grass play field. There are benches and seating along the trails. There's an access point to the elementary school through here. And there's an old outdoor classroom area and some old fitness facilities scattered throughout the woods from back in the day. These are some site photographs. This is some of the bench trail network leading from the that circular parking lot off Harris Boulevard. This is the connection over to the school. It goes to a fenced area by the playground that I believe has a lock on it. One of the big challenges of the site is it's bisected by Campbell Creek that has over 100 acres draining through it. And you can see that over time, the county struggled getting all that water through the trail system. So we've got stream crossings that have blown out. And so that's a big impact to keeping both sides of the park connected. As I mentioned earlier, if you get back in the woods and the weeds, there's old fitness circuits from, I think, back when the city owned the park. You know, these are push-up bars and other circuit stations throughout the woods. This is the frontage along Harris Boulevard. You can see we've got a fairly small sidewalk along a very busy road. And behind that sidewalk that is in disrepair from tree roots heaving the sidewalks, there's a pretty significant slope down to that creek. This is the crossing at Harris Boulevard. These are a couple of 5-foot pipes, and then there's another pipe over here, and then there's other drainage that comes down through this area. So there's a tremendous amount of stormwater that connects in right here and then heads down southwest through the park. One of the benefits that the park has, an opportunity, is they've got a signalized intersection at Harris and North Idlewild Road, and it is set up for good, safe pedestrian access. And you can see right now that there's not really any sort of connection point from this pedestrian crossing into the park. So when we start working on a site, you know, site visit is always sort of the first step, and you start getting ideas and scribbling things down and thinking about what's missing, what catches your eye, what opportunities exist, what hazards may need to be mitigated, and that sort of thing. And this is just some of the rough draft sketchy work that we do at the beginning of the process. We're identifying land uses and, you know, constraints and opportunities, and then walking through the site, looking at, you know, like I mentioned, that connection over at the signalized intersection and other things that will factor in ultimately into the design of the site. As we've refined that a little bit on this slide, this is sort of an existing conditions component of the site analysis. So starting from sort of top to bottom, Harris Boulevard, we have a full movement driveway into this existing parking lot, which is, you know, there's a lot of traffic on Harris Boulevard. Left turns into here are a bit of a challenge, and something that, you know, I think as an overall design team has sort of been grappling with. How do you maximize access to the park and then mitigate, you know, safety concerns for vehicular traffic and turning movements where you don't have a signal. Down here, as I mentioned, there's a safe pedestrian crossing that isn't really being used. The connection to the school is through here. We've had conversations with the school administration talking about their interest in using the park, having access to the park, and I think we've gotten some positive feedback from them. There's an existing open lawn here. This whole stretch along Harris Boulevard is pretty heavily wooded, and so this area is not very visible from the street. And so there's oftentimes, you know, people driving by don't even realize that there's a park there. And we thought that that was something that could use some work. As I mentioned, there are streams that bisect the site. There's areas that are possible wetlands that, you know, have some environmental concerns. The existing outdoor classroom is back in this area, but it's in disrepair. And, you know, if it's something that the school wants to use, we have to be considerate of how far away from the school or bathroom facilities it is, and how difficult it might be for teachers to bring all their kids over to here. And so we're continuing the dialogue with the school system about that. And as you saw in the photograph earlier, the creek crossing here is in desperate need of repair, and it needs to be put back in a way that is not going to get washed out next time we have a big storm event. The existing trail network sort of comes and goes through the woods because of sort of neglect of maintenance. And, you know, we've got this nice open grass area that's not really getting used for anything. The end of Maple Knoll Avenue, it doesn't acknowledge any sort of existence of the park. And so these are the things that we sort of found on our site visit and studying the site. So the next half of that is, okay, well, what do you do with that info? And so going back to the top of the page, looking at the existing parking, as Joyce mentioned, neighborhood parks don't normally have parking facilities. They're intended to be walked to from the neighborhoods, but acknowledging the challenges that you have with Harris Boulevard sort of cutting off a portion of the vicinity from good pedestrian access. You know, we're contemplating what to do with this parking. You know, can we modify the parking area to introduce some other uses, or do some things to improve its safety and access? As I mentioned, you know, we've got this open lawn here that could be programmed a little bit more intentionally and also opened up. You know, we can regrade it so that it's more visible from the street so that people can see things are happening and promote people using it. You know, do we renovate the existing outdoor classroom, and how and for whom is another question. As I mentioned before, the stream crossing needs to be repaired. I think the trail network needs to be expanded. We've had conversations about paving some of the trail network so that it provides better accessibility. And then, you know, you also can expand the trail network with unpaved to add more spurs off the trail network and more opportunities for people to enjoy the space. We strongly believe that the park needs a front door here, or at least a strong second front door, because this is sort of the safest and best way to walk or bring your kids on a bike to the park. It provides a strong connection to the rec center, so that, you know, if they've got summer camps and things like that and want to come down here, they can walk right down the sidewalk and cross safely at the pedestrian crossing. So we feel like there's a lot of opportunity in this portion of the park to make improvements that will improve visibility. The other thing is, you know, when the vehicles stop at the red light here, the more that's happening here, you know, you have 30 seconds if you're not looking at your phone while you're sitting at the red light to see action going on at the park that will improve use of the park and generate interest. The other thing, as we mentioned, is Maple Knoll Drive. There's an opportunity for a pedestrian connection here that will open up the park to this whole neighborhood more effectively. Because right now, you know, you can get there, but you're walking through the woods and climbing through brambles and things like that to get to the trail network. We need to strengthen this so it'll encourage pedestrian activity. So in summary, from the site analysis, we believe that the park needs better visibility. The more eyes that are on the park, the better. Safe park access is a challenge. As I mentioned, the car movements turning into the parking lot, especially turning left, is a bit of a challenge. The pedestrian access needs work. You know, the creek tends to divide the park, and so you have to figure out a way to link the activities on both sides or have them function successfully. You know, we don't have the opportunity to put a great big field right in the middle of the park that connects everything together. So we have to be cognizant of that and do what we can to strengthen the two sides. We feel like it's a diamond in the rough. You know, it needs investment and it needs maintenance, and it needs an ongoing commitment from the county, as well as, you know, from the neighborhood, to use it, pay attention to it, care for it, and help it succeed. So that's sort of the results of what we came away with from the site analysis. So the next question is, now what? And what we're here today to talk about is some of the park programming ideas. We've had the website up for about 3 weeks, a little more than 3 weeks, and it's asked some questions, and we appreciate those of you who've responded. And what we'd like to do is kind of walk through some of the ideas and then get a little bit more input from you guys, and then we'll have sort of an open Q&A. And if anybody has any comments along the way, please, you know, add them into the chat, because we'll talk about that as well. So one of the ideas is, as I mentioned, both paved and unpaved walking trails. These are examples of how those might look from other parks here in the county. Grass playfield. As I mentioned, there's an existing one up by the parking lot on the north side of the park, and there's an opportunity to improve one on the south side of the park as well. Some of the feedback that we've gotten on the website was about a possible dog park or picnic shelter, those sorts of ideas. Some of the ideas also include possibly a bike park, or one thing that's becoming more popular is what's called a bike pump track, which is sort of an opportunity for people to improve their bike handling skills. It's sort of like an obstacle course in a way, but gives people different topography and different things to have fun with their bikes. Playgrounds, playground equipment. Community garden, farmer's market would be a possibility. And again, these are ideas designed to foster feedback from you guys. As I mentioned, there's an existing fitness circuit out in the woods that's sort of fallen into disrepair. You know, Mecklenburg County has put in fitness circuits in many of their parks because they're really good for all ages to get out and move and build your strength. And then public art. This is an example from one of the other parks in Mecklenburg County. So I guess next, we'd like to review some of the website feedback that we've gotten. And I don't know if all of you have gone to the website. We've gotten about responses from about 18 to 20 folks. And that's the address, publicinput.com/Albemarle. And we'll continue to monitor the website and get additional feedback if you think of something after today's meeting. Some of the feedback that we got, this is as of yesterday. One of the questions was, are you more likely to walk or drive to Albemarle Road? And so you can see there's about a 60-40 split of driving versus walking. This is another kind of related question. What do you think about removing the parking facility? As Joyce had mentioned, you know, neighborhood parks don't normally have parking, but this is not a normal neighborhood park. And so you can see that about half the respondents said they'd like to keep the parking. These are the results of some of the questions about how can we make the park feel safer. You can see maintenance and lighting, increasing people and activities. And that goes back to what I was talking about earlier. When we can increase and improve visibility in the park, that helps drive out less desirable activity. You know, the things that people don't want to have happen in parks don't like to be watched. And so if we can improve visibility by opening up some of the woods, cleaning out some of the underbrush, regrading some areas so that the visibility is better, then that helps quite a bit. This is sort of a demographic survey, and you can see that most of the respondents are not children. And I mean, this is talking about household members that will use the park. So the top responses from the web survey of what things would you like to see in the park include this list. So conversation about a bike park, community garden, dog park, educational trails, farmer's market, multi-purpose field, natural play area, nature and observation areas. I think somebody mentioned bird watching. um, outdoor exercise equipment, public art, picnic pavilion, and walking trails and neighborhood connectivity. What we'd like to do next is, if Katie can push the poll button, you should get up on your screen a poll. And so what we'd like to see is an opportunity, if you can pick the top three, because with, with the master plan, we can plan for the future, but with a $250,000 phase one budget, we can't do everything immediately. And so if you could help us by prioritizing the uses that we've got shown in the poll here, that will help us know where to focus as we refine this next process. So we'll give it a few minutes and fill out the poll and hit the submit button.
We've got most everyone. I'll give everyone about 20 more seconds and then I'll end the poll. All right, 5 more seconds.
All right. So there we have instant results. Walking trails, nature play, observation, educational trails, bike park. Look like the top three winners: farmers market, community garden. Look like they're coming in well as well. Okay, fantastic. These are a couple of comments that were write-ins on the web survey. People had mentioned opportunities for youth outreach with stream cleanups. Talked about better accommodations for special needs. Somebody mentioned a Braille nature trail. Somebody had mentioned needing a dog park. And then again, kind of like with the youth outreach, opportunities for mentoring programs. And that once you get the physical components of the park, those are program components that can be done within the new and improved park. So our next step, I'm going to turn it back over to Bert. We're going to basically open the floor for folks to chime in and let us know your thoughts. If we haven't covered anything, or if you'd like to elaborate or ask questions, sort of open the floor.
Yeah, so I'll start with a couple of questions that we had come in through the chat. So the first was, are there any bike pump tracks or pump parks within the county right now? And the answer is yes. We've got one that's down at, I think it's Colonel Francis Beatty Park, maybe at Ballantyne Park, but it's somewhere in the south edge of the county.
Yes, that's Colonel Francis Beatty.
Thank you. So it's one that a partner group of ours, Tar Heel Trailblazers, built several years ago. It's a much longer track, so it's geared more for adult use. In a neighborhood park setting like this, if we were to go in and do a track like that, it would be quite a bit smaller, kind of like the image that Matt shared earlier. So we have one there, but we see a need for more bike parks and smaller pump tracks, so to allow us to host some learn to ride places and provide a safe place for kids to learn how to ride bikes and go and enjoy bikes before they step out onto a greenway or out on the road within some of the bike paths and bike lanes that we have that CDOT has put kind of throughout the city. Another question we got, any thoughts of a small splash pad? That was actually something that we included on the poll online, and we didn't get a tremendous amount of feedback there. If we were to think about a splash pad there, it would most likely be on the recreation center side of the park, associated with the rec center, for a couple of reasons. One, it's a type of facility that draws people from further out than just necessarily the neighborhood. So we've got restrooms over there, we've got locker rooms, and we've got parking that could be used for that. And the same would be said for a dog park. If we were to think about a dog park in this area, then we might think about it over at the recreation center rather than within the confines of the park on the west side of W.T. Harris there. Ann Harrison, hope you're doing well. Ann asked the question in whether or not the school has been approached about participation in the outdoor classroom. We have talked to the school and I believe the principal, and Joyce, you might need to jump in here, about keeping and improving that access from the park and through the park to the school. And they were absolutely on board with that. One question that we have and we'll work through is whether or not the location of that classroom right now is the proper location, or if it needs to be more part of the central part of the park there. Joyce, have we talked specifically about the classroom with the school yet?
Well, the classroom is obviously not being used. It has fallen into disrepair. But when we talk to the elementary school, right now there's a lot of concerns with the park, obviously, because it's in disrepair and it's abandoned. But if it was to be revitalized, if it was to be improved, there's interest, especially with their older kids, in using the park and being able to, you know, have an outdoor science type component. And they're also interested they mentioned applying for a grant for a community garden. So that's also an interest of the school for their site. So there is interest. We just need to, you know, work together to make the park better and safer.
Have you had any conversations with the middle school principal as well?
Not the middle school.
Okay. Dawn mentioned in the comments that it'd be good to get them involved, that they have done some stream cleanups and things like that. And so, Dawn, that's a great idea. We'll make sure to reach out to the middle school principal there as well and think about connectivity from the park through the entire CMS campus there. I believe that is one of the schools that they're looking to do some improvement on because of the vast number of mobile units that they're having to use right now in terms of the amount of kids there. So we have monthly meetings with CMS and their real estate folks who will make sure to ask about that from a broader standpoint. Let's see. Mark asked, talk a little about existing parking and the need for that, maybe relocating up front. So I'm not sure what you mean, Mark, by up front. There are some topographic challenges and some stormwater challenges in pushing the parking up along W.T. Harris right there. What we may be able to do is reduce and minimize the amount of parking spaces that we have at the existing location. You said towards the light. Well, so that's a good question. And, you know, I'll open that up to everybody that's here. Does it make sense to go in and add more parking to a neighborhood park, or does it make sense to take advantage of some of those open areas with a community garden? You know, we've got 2 lawn areas here, and the one thing that you really need for a really good community garden is sunlight. And so, you know, we've got 2 opportunities to be able to go in and activate these spaces with a community garden. Does it make sense to go in and reduce some of that space with a parking area? So if you want to unmute, I'd be happy to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'll just chime in. What I was thinking was if you eliminate some of that parking over by the apartments and put it up front towards the light, you sort of create an area over there that's kind of a buffer for the apartments and maybe more of a natural area or other things, and then have the parking up towards the front, towards the street, and then it could be more centrally located. And that way, in the future, when you do anything across to the recreation center, you have sort of the pocket up front. That was kind of my thought.
I got you. And it looks like Rachel is on board with what you're saying there. There was also another question about the crosswalk from Idlewild Road north to the other side. So the existing crosswalk exists there now. The problem is we don't have a formal path that connects from that crosswalk area into the park and kind of across the creek over to the existing lawn area and over to the school. And so we see that as a really easy kind of short-term improvement that we can go to increase circulation kind of to and through the park.
Right, and Bert, if I can chime in for a second about
Sure.
the moving the parking, that was one of the early ideas that we had tossed around as well. And we've actually reached out to Charlotte DOT to talk about the feasibility of doing that. And if, you know, with this, if you look at this intersection, you've got this through movement that comes through like this, that's signalized, and you've got this lane that goes this way and is signalized, and you've got 3 lanes coming out that are signalized. And the conversations that we've had have basically resulted in it is very expensive to modify all these signals and all the pedestrian crossings to add and change the signal timing to add a 4th leg here, and it would basically blow through all the budget of, you know, phase 1 to accommodate that. It is absolutely something we can incorporate into the master plan. It just may not happen immediately, but I think it's something that we can certainly take into consideration and put it in the master plan for perhaps down the road.
Good morning.
Question. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Astrid.
Hi, this is Astrid Chirinos. I'm the immediate past executive director of the Simmons YMCA down the street, and now I'm the executive director for community engagement for our YMCA in the whole region. And thank you so much for this very comprehensive presentation. I was wondering, and actually I put on the chat that it was hard to make some decisions about this park since we're not totally clear about the opportunities that the Eastway Recreation Center is going to be offering. So just trying to figure out how we could present both and then take a look at the gaps and, you know, connect each one. Because I mean, I think that the ideas are fantastic. But like, for instance, you know, with our new COVID reality, it would be great to have maybe a drive-in where the families around the neighborhoods, you know, could come in and have Sunday matinee or, you know, but I don't know if that's going to be happening at the Eastway Recreation Center or other opportunities for a lot of the newcomers and immigrants that are around the corridor in terms of, you know, in culture, in language, recreational activities. So I wasn't sure how do they connect with each other and how they complement each other. And also my last comment is, have you thought about talking to our Y to see how we can support you in terms of promoting, maybe getting our children learning how to ride a bike in there, or many of the other amenities that you have. How can we support and increase your efforts? Because we're partners with the Albemarle School as well. And we have 17 acres. We have the first water park in Charlotte on our site. And I think that there's a lot of synergy that could take place. So I know that's a lot of information, but I was just wondering what are the interdependencies with the Eastway and the park, and then with your partners down the street like us.
Sure. So in terms of interdependencies, I think this park will function somewhat independent from Eastway. The focus here is going to be kind of on the direct kind of community in and around this area that are kind of within a 10-minute walk or a 10-minute bike from the park perspective. Now that area branches out a little bit with the recreation center, but a lot of our recreation center services here, just across the street, are going to focus on the immediate needs of the neighborhood there. Where at Eastway, it's got a much broader, it's, you know, the east side of town really, in terms of the types of programming and things that they're going to include there. There's a heavy senior component that will take place at Eastway, as well as a lot of classrooms for a lot of different types of facilities. Albemarle Recreation Center, just across the road here, is now one of our older, if not the oldest recreation center that we have that hasn't had a significant update. So we feel like within our next capital improvement plan, not only will we be able to realize the full improvements to the neighborhood park component, but also fold in improvements in renovation to the existing recreation center there. I love your idea about using the park here as a programmatic opportunity, not only for park and recreation, but for other groups as well. We only have one bike park that we've created so far, and that's over at Arbor Glen Recreation Center off of Clanton Road on the west side of Uptown. And we've had quite a few different groups come in and hold Learn to Ride events and various events within that location. And so we see the same opportunity here, and maybe that's a really good way that we go in and reuse the existing paved parking area now, is we use that pavement, regrade it, and stripe it and paint it for a bike park and activate it and tie it into more of a loop trail system. That way, within the park, that way we broaden and take advantage of kind of what the priorities of the community are, and then some of our programmatic opportunities as well there.
So this is Tisha Board. I too am very appreciative of this opportunity to participate in what's happening like right in our area. Just a little background. I'm the founder of Promise Youth Development, and we host a mentoring program right there in your Albemarle Road Recreation Center. We've been there almost, well, next in a couple months it'll be 4 years. So we are ecstatic about the relationship and partnership that we currently have. Also with our program, we have a strong partnership with CMPD. So they serve as some of our mentors for the kids in the neighborhood. That apartment complex is Heritage East, I think is what it's called, or Heritage Park, I get it mixed up, Heritage Park. And so if you know anything about that area, this is the part I want to share. It's high crime in that area, from that neighborhood. They get a lot of calls. They used to get a lot of calls for service there. And that prompted me to kind of reach out to CMPD and say, like, how can we change the trajectory here? How can we kind of switch this? And thankfully, because of our partnership with them and the relationship, like the true relationship they have with the kids, we've seen some of those calls diminish. Now, it hasn't completely gone away because we're working with the kids and not the adults so much. However, I want to say that the majority of the kids in that apartment complex directly beside the rec center, they're suffering. The rec center, you know, has been closed since March, and we host our program out of there every week. So thankfully, we have been able to, we used to be in a parking lot until the time changed last week. And so thankfully, we can partner now with the Y. But most of the kids in that area, they walk. And so my question is about pedestrian access. So I asked the question about the crosswalk, and I know it's at the Idlewild North light. And like you mentioned already, Bert, like to get down back to the, down back into the park would be a challenge since things aren't built up. So my question is there a way to have like a crosswalk closer back towards the Albemarle Road entrance, well, where the current entrance is now?
You mean back up here?
Yeah.
Yes, somewhere in there.
Yeah, I think that's definitely worth a conversation with. I believe that's a state road, so we'd have to work with both CDOT and NCDOT
Okay.
in order to do that. But I think if we were to go in and do something like that, the natural place for that to be would be where the apartment complex on the east side kind of intersects with the road, and see if there's a potential to do a lighted intersection through there.
Yes.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense, because what we found since we've been there nearly 4 years is that a lot of the kids are unattended, and so they, they're not escorted by adults, and so that's why you have some jaywalking and all these other things that happen, even just to get to the neighborhood Walmart. That's a risk to kind of cross the street. So that would be awesome to have that. And also, the last thing I want to say is that I'm embarrassed to say that I've been in this community for probably 25 years or more, and didn't know that was a park. I didn't know it at all. So to your point that the visibility people, I'm sure some of our kids used to take a path. I wonder if this is a path they used to take to get to their school. If they missed a bus or something, they used to talk to me about a path they used to take. But again, the connectivity to the schools and to neighborhoods, and they also take a path to get to the Y. So whatever that connectivity is going to look like, it would be nice to connect those areas as well, if there's a possibility for that.
Yeah, I think there is, and I think there's a possibility to do that in terms of our initial improvements here. And
Okay.
I mean, your point of not knowing that this was part of the park is understandable completely. There's no visual connection between the road and the park in terms of what that is and what it can be. And so I think that is one of the things that we have to address, not only just from an aesthetic standpoint. If it's a place that looks cared for, it's going to feel much safer, and folks are going to be drawn to go and see what's there. But it's also from a safety standpoint. Not only when you're driving by it, but when you're within it too. You want to be able to see kind of what's around you. That again is it's something that is a point well taken. Thank you.
Right. Hey, Bert, thankfully, Harris is Charlotte DOT maintained, so we wouldn't have to deal with the state.
Awesome.
So that's one less layer. That's good. So yeah. Any other comments?
I wanted to chime in, Tisha, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. And I just wanted to point out that we have also been in touch with the Safe Routes to School program, and we're just, we think that this could be a very good opportunity to create a safe route to school through the park. So once we make some of those improvements and we could enhance the connectivity and the visibility of the school, that is something that we would like to take on, So just wanted to point that out as for the future.
And
I'm
sorry.
I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
Oh no, and to Joyce's point and Tisha's as well, there are several partners on that corridor in that area, churches and other neighborhood organizations that would definitely be interested in engaging their members with the park. And I'm not sure if you have engaged with their pastors and with the heads of some of the neighborhood organizations in that area. Certainly, as the Y would be very interested in supporting and promoting all of it, but there are several partners that can definitely engage with you in this effort right now and get a lot of engagement and participation and attendance from them in the park, which is, kind of the best kept secret in the East.
Yeah. I also serve on the Charlotte East Board, and that's one of the things that we look at everything as it relates to East Charlotte. And there are some amenities that are lacking that we could probably, improve upon now with forums like this to be able to share some of those things. And just one last point about the rec center. And I would like to see if there's someone I can talk to about the rec center on this call. maybe after this call, just to kind of ask some questions. That rec center has been shut down since March. And even like you said, it's the oldest one. So how do they prioritize like the capital budgets? And what is that process? And maybe we can talk about that offline.
Yeah, so I can answer your high level question, and then I'll put my email address in the chat. And then
Okay.
you can email me directly and I'll get you in touch with
Sweet.
someone to have
Okay.
a more detailed conversation. But
That
Joyce
sounds good.
mentioned early in the presentation our new master plan, MeckPlaybook. And part of the charge of that document and the importance of that document is what we hear from the public and what gets recommended through that document is what will help us determine our next round of funding from a project standpoint. One thing that I will share here is a lot of what we heard is we need to take care of what we have before we concentrate and spend so much time and money and energy on adding new things. And so that plays both towards the neighborhood park, Albemarle Road Park, and to the recreation center there, that we need to go in and prioritize improvements to those areas before we necessarily go and build, you know, the next regional recreation center or the next recreation center or the next neighborhood park.
Okay.
You had any plans about, you know, what the youth does around our, you know, in Eastland? It's that they have created their own ramps for skating and all of those things that, you know, I mean, this is just organic, right? These young kids do this. I mean, have you thought about perhaps, I didn't see that into any of the options. Have you thought about providing kind of like a formalized place for them to do that, which would attract a lot of the youth around there? I know it's a little bit, you know, intense, but at the same time, it would just really create, you know, a multi-generational, you know, in terms of the youth engagement. You know, there, I mean, I don't know, they keep doing that at Eastland organically, but,
Right.
you know, it would be a great opportunity.
We've been in touch with the development team for the Eastland site for about a year now. And I believe what I understand now is there is a small park that's part of kind of the center of that that plan. And so we've been talking with them about that becoming a county park. One of the things that's been discussed more recently is including a skate park component within that park to keep it on that site rather than necessarily moving it somewhere else. Because it's there for a reason, right? It's there because there's a heavy skate community in that area, and it's convenient for them to be able to get there. And so we feel like it's very important to try to keep that use there. If we were to think about a skate park kind of within the context of both sides of W.T. Harris, it would most likely be on the east side, close to the recreation center, because of the parking component there, and it's going to be much easier to drive to that with a larger parking area than you know, filling up a smaller parking area that we might have associated with the neighborhood park side of the complex.
Got it. Thank you.
And if I could chime in for a second, thank you for that comment, Astrid. I just wanted to point out that a skate park was one of the options in the web survey. If any of you guys have not gotten a chance to go in there and add your input, please do so. And if you could forward it to as many people as you know, as many people as you want, we love to get more input. But yeah, that was one of the options in the actual survey. It didn't get as much, you know, as much people interested. But again, we would like to get as much, showing how many people, we would like to get as much input from the community or from anybody you know or your circles. Send out that information, and we'll keep it open for some time. So yeah, looks like 2 people. But
Joey, could you send me the separate, I mean, is it possible to send it so I could send it to my networks On the,
Absolutely. We would
okay.
love that. Yes.
Yep.
We added it to the chat, but I will send it to you directly. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see, we had a couple more comments come in. There was one, let's see, from Dawn, and interested in helping get rid of some of the invasive species within the park. So Tesha mentioned a few minutes ago that a number of our facilities have been impacted by the pandemic. One thing that we have been able to do more recently is some volunteer days in various parks and nature preserves. So it may be that in early 2021, before we start the active construction for this, I think it'd be a fantastic opportunity for us to get a group of volunteers together with some of the folks here, and then branching out to some of your networks to go in and start to do kind of a community outreach day where we go in and start to remove some of those invasive species. And that volunteer effort, is going to translate into more dollars from our pockets being able to go to improvements within the park. So that's a fantastic idea.
I just have a last comment. I apologize, I forgot to mention it, Bert. Freedom Park is such a great attraction. And one of the reasons is because of that pavilion that he has there where, you could do all kinds of things. Community can create and co-create and be there for all kinds of different reasons. Is that something that could be possible there for little concerts and, convening, just conversations, all kinds of opportunities for even kids that are in theater to be able to, use the stage and do a lot of that, I see that done at Freedom with that pavilion, is that a possibility? And maybe I missed it. I just didn't see that as an option.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. The reason that we didn't include that as an option is just the size of the space that we have here and the size of the event that we would be able to accommodate. Within the neighborhood park, typically we don't have parking areas. So if we did any kind of gathering like that, you'd have to have parking and restrooms associated with it. With Freedom, I think we've got over 300 parking spaces throughout the park there. I don't know exactly what we have over at the recreation center, but here in the park, there's maybe 8 to 10 parking spaces currently right now. Maybe it goes up to 20.
Okay.
So part of that is from a network standpoint, does it make sense to have a facility like that would draw a crowd that would be much larger than our current facilities would accommodate? That's where we would start to think about kind of the broader context of our system, and maybe one of the future improvements on the Eastway site would be something where we could have larger gatherings like that, where we've got over 300 parking spaces to be able to use for the center in the park itself.
Got it.
Hey, Bert, this is Alex. I didn't get to introduce myself earlier. This is Alex Roller. I'm the regional park manager for the South region, which includes this park and this part of the east part of Charlotte as well. To answer that question, also just kind of going off what Bert said, program activities like that would be done is more associated with the rec center side of the park. And you have to look at this, even though it has a road that splits it, this park is split by the W.T. Harris, but it is still one park essentially. So those type of opportunities would be had over on the rec center side with the larger open spaces and with the open field and the larger playground and the parking lot itself. So those are not cut down that we can't do things like that, but it just wouldn't be available on this side of the park as much. The other thing that was offered in the on the survey was also a small picnic shelter, which could possibly, if that was implemented in here, could be part of that, but it would not be to anywhere near the size that you would do a Freedom Park. You have to remember, this is a neighborhood park versus Freedom Park is a regional park. So there's different aspects that you can do inside of each park.
Got it. Thank you.
You know, one of the opportunities that I think is worth contemplating is as we relook at the outdoor classroom and possibly renovating it or relocating it to help it be more effective for the school, is it might be able to be configured in a way that promotes what Astrid's talking about at an appropriate venue size, so that, you know, if middle school drama wanted to do, you know, Midsummer Night's Dream in a small setting or something like that out in the woods, they might be able to use that outdoor classroom space, so that just with some flexibility or dual use of that classroom space with the seating that it may contain, there's an opportunity there possibly.
That's great. Thank you.
I just had one last question. So is the thought to reduce the parking lot size or completely eliminate the parking?
Yeah, that was part of the reason that we asked the question through the web poll. And it seems to me that it would be reducing the parking. There is some advantage from an operational standpoint to have a parking area there for us to be able to get there, get our equipment in, and not only, you know, build and reconstruct and improve the park, but maintain it once that's done. So I think there has to be some kind of a small parking component there, given the fact that we've got, you know, we're separated by W.T. Harris. But the location of that parking is something that it sounds like makes sense to reconsider. And then the size of the parking is something that we need to think about as well. We don't necessarily need to go in and build 30 parking spaces in such a small park. You know, we would limit it to probably, you know, 8 to 10, something like that.
How many are there now, Bart?
I can't recall. Matt, do you know off the top of your head?
I don't. A
It'd be
lot.
hard to count. I think there's
it's okay.
between 12 and 20 would be my guess right now. Yeah.
So is there a way, because transportation is such a huge challenge for us in the corridor, is there, so people, you know, parents will want to come and, you know, park and be there, you know, but then because the kids might not be able to get there, is there a way to have a shuttle that can pick up kids around? I mean, or is that just too far-fetched for me to ask? Or could you have partnerships in some way that can help bring kids all at the same time and just take them back? Or maybe people could come and pick them up since you have such a limited amount of parking.
Yeah, I think we've used shuttles in the past, but for the most part, when we've done that, it's been for specific special events. It hasn't been just for folks to come and visit a park. So, you know, there may be an opportunity to do something similar to that as part of programming through the recreation center. Another way to improve that access is to make it easier to be able to walk or bike to the park. And so with some of the improvements that we can do within the park and making connections to the local road network, making connections to the school, and then making that connection to the bike ped crossing that's already in place along W.T. Harris. Those are the things that we can do very easily early on. And then some of those larger events and things like that, we can absolutely look at how we get folks to and from without having to kind of inundate the space with a lot of parking.
Thanks.
Just one more thing, and I'm going to stop talking, I promise, because I just learned that there was a park here, so now I have all these questions. But my question is about, I know that probably the design plan is to look at the demographics of the area that you have the parks and recreation centers. And as we know, this is probably not the most favorable area for several reasons, right? And so I wonder if there's an opportunity to scale projects based on your demographics. With that specifically, I'm asking, like, there are lots of apartments around there, right? Lots of apartments. And so some safety and security measures, like, you know, lighting. We did this with the rec center and the adjacent apartments because that path where the kids walk through was so dark. And in the past, they found a dead body there. So the kids were terrified. So we, talked to the county commissioners and city council to kind of help us with that. And we got a light now. So if something like that for the park to be well lit and very secure and make people feel like they're safe, I think that would be a huge asset to bring in something, enhancing the park on the east side.
I think that's a good item for us to discuss. Typically, our parks are open dawn to dusk, and so unless there's a use or programmed use that goes on there after hours, we typically don't light within those parks. The recreation center is an exception because we have some early morning and later evening programming where we go in and do that. Now, if we find a lot of the folks that are participating in those programs are walking to and from the neighborhood around, at that time, I think it probably makes sense for us to go in and consider doing some more lighting within the park and specifically along those trails to be able to provide that safer access for people to get to and from. So that's a great point.
Yeah, and one of the other things to think about is, since this neighborhood park's kind of unique in that it has parking already, from a safety perspective, perhaps putting a gate or nighttime would discourage people from being there when they're not supposed to be there.
Definitely for car access, but pedestrians, they can get around it. But that's a great point, because the rec center did that, and that decreased a lot of the activity that was occurring in the park. In the rec center, in the parking lot after hours. Yeah, that has been a tremendous help.
Yeah, we're not going to go and build a fence around the park. That's no.
No.
No, it doesn't make sense. It makes it look like it's not, part of the public, right? So yeah, people can get in there at nighttime, but from a vehicular standpoint, I think that's a point well taken for sure.
And again, it goes back to visibility, because right now it's pretty wooded and hard to tell what's happening, and activities that you don't want to have happen don't like to be watched. So if we can open it up, make it more visible, that's better.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to share? If not, we'll go to the final slide. So I think this was a great discussion. I don't know that we had a huge turnout, but I think the folks that we had here had some fantastic ideas and some input that are gonna help us determine kind of how we move forward and where we move forward. Very quickly, Matt, I'll let you talk to this image here.
Sure. So, like I said, from the beginning, we're starting to kick around ideas, and as we get more information, we roll that information into the ideas, and we toss around some different concepts. This is just a quick concept that Lisa had pulled together of what ifs. Like, what if the parking went away and became a bike park? What if, there was a dog park that came in here? What if you paved the trail? What if you created sort of an entry node at the end of Maple Knoll so that this neighborhood was better connected into that? Community garden, and like we've talked about several times, the sort of no-brainer opportunity is make a strong pedestrian connection where you've got the safe crosswalk across Harris right now. This ties it better to the rec center. And so what we'll do is we'll take the information from the website, information from today, more bright ideas we might think about at 2 o'clock in the morning, and come up with some concepts that'll look kind of like this. And then we'll post them on the website so you guys will be able to see the different concepts. So, maybe 2, maybe 3 concepts of how these pieces may work out on the site as we refine the master plan. And then from that, then we'll start looking at what can we do within the budget we have for phase 1. So the master plan is one document, and then the phase 1 implementation is the next piece, and it's a subset of the master plan. And so pieces of the overall master plan may be, 5 or 10 years down the road, but we'll carve out of it a phase 1 set to move into construction plans and permitting and move into construction.
Thank you, Matt. So this meeting has been recorded. So we know that you guys have a larger network, and what we'll do is we'll post the link to this meeting through our publicinput.com site, and we'll send a follow-up email that has the link to that site in it. It will have our contact information, and it will have the link to the MeckPlaybook website as well. So you guys can share that amongst your groups. If you have any questions or anything like that, Joyce Figueroa's email address is on here, and she can post that. We'll also post the PDF of the slide deck that we went through today, and make sure that that you have that in case you want to go back and reference anything that we talked about. So over the next month or so, we're going to take the input that we received today and through the website, and we're going to start to develop that broader master plan and then dial in on that first phase. I really like the idea that that came up in the meeting today about having a volunteer effort day out there. So we're going to go ahead and talk with Karen Howard, who oversees our volunteer program at Park and Recreation, and see if we can't go ahead and find a date to do that early in 2021. And when we do that, we'll make sure to post it to the website, and we'll anytime we make those additions to the website, we'll send an email out to all of you that have signed up to be notified about the project as well. So with that, I thank you again for all of your comments, great participation today, and we look forward to working with you and seeing these improvements come to life in the spring. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.